As if back to school wasn't stressful enough this year, there is added strain for some families with separated couples disagreeing on whether a child should or should not be in school. Joining me to discuss is Anna Marie Musson, a Toronto family lawyer with nearly 20 years' experience. After hundreds of hours sparring in courtrooms, she now practices collaborative family law, wanting to devote her professional pursuits towards helping families as they navigate the hardships of divorce. She is principal of Musson Law Firm in downtown Toronto. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, so before we jump into the difficulties families are facing right now, explain to me what collaborative law is.
Well, collaborative law is a process where the parties agree that they're not going to court, that the spouses understand and appreciate that they are the best people to make the decisions for their family, for their kids moving forward. So in a traditional system, the lawyers would work against each other and try to cast the spouse in the worst possible light ever. In the collaborative process, we all work together to find solutions that make sense for the family. So it's really a great way for families to deal with these issues.
So is it the same as mediation or a little bit different?
It's different than mediation because in mediation, you still have that overarching threat of court looming in the background. Whereas in the collaborative process, we take that off the table from the get-go. So no matter what, you can't use the same collaborative lawyer if you do at some point want to go to court. So when we take that threat out of the equation altogether, it really gives people an opportunity to be open and to have some meaningful discussions.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's great. Okay, so let's talk about how COVID-19 then has now impacted this whole entire process, because it's affected everything in terms of separated couples from, if one person's going out in public and one person's not, and so on and so forth. So tell me some of the issues you're seeing.
Well, what was interesting was when COVID first started, the increase in our calls practically doubled. So we had so many extra people calling us wanting to talk about separation, how they could really sort of get out of the situation, because the couple was now forced to be at home, and where before they had opportunities to work, go to the gym, see their friends, now they were stuck in a relationship they didn't want to be in, and they wanted a way out. So that was number one, the very interesting sort of first dynamic of COVID was the increase in calls. Then another interesting trend was we had a number of couples who also wanted us to negotiate separation agreements while they were physically still living in the same house. Because COVID really struck them in terms of their financial assets, and in terms of their investments were down, et cetera, they couldn't afford to physically separate, but they couldn't stand one more minute being in the relationship together.
So they were looking to go from marriage to roommates.
Right. And so we actually put structure in place. So one spouse would be with the kids during certain periods of time of the day. The other spouse would have responsibilities. They would have separate parts of the house. So it really was an interesting sort of phenomenon that was happening, but it really sort of worked for these families, and they don't intend to sell anytime soon, but they got some relief.
Okay, excellent. And so in terms of kids, what did you see happening there?
Again, we were seeing a lot of situations where we were really trying to get the parents to focus on the kids. So because they were in such high pressure situations, being cooped up in the house together, we were really trying to focus on the parents who are looking to separate, to really make sure that they were staying as child focused as possible. So in the collaborative process, we work with a social worker. So the social worker will come in and give the kids a voice in the process. And so in the traditional court model, the kids don't necessarily have that. It's the parents sort of sparring in court. Whereas in the collaborative process, the social worker comes in, gives a voice to the child, and really helps the parents understand how their actions and the things they're doing are affecting the kids. So that was something else that we really focused on. And of course, the other thing that we're really dealing with now, which has sort of been over the last few weeks, has been the COVID back to school situation.
Right. And that's really what I want to focus on, because I imagine we all know that there really is no wrong answer here in if kids go back to school or not. The problem is when you have two people with two opposing views on where the child should be.
Right. And there's so many unknowns. And I think that's what's really terrifying parents. And so what we're specifically seeing are a lot of cases where one parent wants the child to go back to school and the other thinks homeschooling is better. In situations where the parents are together, much easier for them to find a solution to that problem. But when we're dealing with two divorced parents who are trying to co-parent, but who have very different views on the situation, who's right? Who gets to make that decision? And so we were using collaborative process to bring a social worker in to help the family really try to sort out these issues. One of the challenges is there really was no relief for people to go to court. The court's been operating at such a reduced capacity. They're dealing with backlogs. They're dealing with urgent only issues. And so even if the couple was hoping to have a judge make a decision on their part, it really logistically and practically wasn't possible. So we really had to think outside of the box to come up with ways to help the parents find middle ground. I can say though, this past week, there were a couple of decisions that did come out of the court, and I do think it's a little bit interesting what the judges take on some of these this particular situation.
Well, this is what led me to you. Before you share this is what led me to you, because when you shared this, I thought this is interesting because nobody who is winning in this, certainly not the child, and there's always going to be an unhappy party in the relationship between the two parents, right?
Well, someone's always not going to quote unquote win on this issue. What I found particularly interesting was really sort of the court's take on this situation. And they're really of the mindset that if there's no harm to the child or to immediate family members, that really the kids need to be going back to school. And they're really falling back on the government, who they're of the view that the government says it's safe for the kids to go back to school. We're going to support that, which I found very interesting. Now, of course, that's sort of just the baseline, which is kids are going back to school if there's a dispute between homeschooling and in-person attendance. But what will be interesting is where there are cases of issues with health issues of a parent or health issues of the child, I think that decision is going to be a little bit different. But really the default is kids are going back to school.
That's really interesting because, I imagine that the courts, have to remove emotion from the equation. And for parents, this is a very emotional decision. I know myself really struggling with that decision. It comes from a place of pure emotion.
Right. And the judges are just not equipped, and nor do they want to deal with it. The judges are there to apply the black letter of law. But we all know in family law, the emotions really are sort of more important in some cases to manage than the actual applying of the statutes and the law. So they're really in a bit of a bind, these judges, trying to sort out these situations in such an emotionally charged situation. So that's why we're really directing a lot of parents and people to the collaborative process, because we're really helping families come to middle ground, come to make these decisions that are very child-focused, I call it kid-centric, and really get them to a place where they can make a decision that makes the most sense. And what was really interesting to me this past week was I had two cases where the kids wanted to go back to school. And they were 12 and 13. And, we really wanted to give them a voice in the process as well, because they were the ones who said, wait a minute, Mom, I want to go back to school. And although Mom had a lot of anxiety about it, we really wanted to give them a voice.
Okay. So is it now, we have only about a minute left here. So for people who've been in this process now, they were in the courts are backlogged. Is it too late for them to jump into the collaborative law process, or?
Absolutely not. In fact, we've had a number of new calls from people who have said, okay, we're somewhere in the court system. We're not sure where. It's not working for us. We're not getting the results as fast as we need or answers as fast as we need. And we can't stay in limbo. Limbo is just causing way too much anxiety and stress on this family. So they are moving over into the collaborative process, and we're helping them sort of restart and almost press reboot on their current divorce situation. And we're really helping them at least come up with some immediate solutions, because some of these things are really urgent, and really helping them moving forward.
Okay, excellent. So if people want to know more, then where can they find you?
They can check out our website, www.mlawgroup.ca.
Okay, wonderful. And are you on social media?
Yes, we're on Twitter @Musson Law.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you for having me.